I'm sorry, dear pod people, for the delay. This podcast is also going to be a bit more personal in more than one way. Reason one is the subject is a thing that is very dear to me, but the other reason is the same as the delay, namely that my brother died recently. He was only 38 years old and he got a severe cerebral infarction, and it cost him his life very suddenly. To not put too much of a damper on all the joy of the rest of the podcast, I do want to tell you about my brother, but I will keep that for at the end of the podcast. So if you want to hear about my brother Tim, keep listening after the end. All right. Let's kick it off. Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. Orbiting this at a distance of roughly 98 million miles is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet whose ape-descended life forms are so amazingly primitive that they still think podcasts are a pretty neat idea. One of these podcasts is called the Thumb Wrestling Movie Podcast, and it is brought to you by Cine.nl. This must you see.
Please listen up to what I have to say, 'cause we're in for some old-fashioned wrestling today. Not the violent, oily opposerish kind, but the kind that involves pins and thumbs you will find, 'cause it's thumb wrestling time. Yes, it's thumb wrestling time. So we will discuss pros and cons, faults and pluses of all your favorite movies, and we will ponder the merits of cinema in this WrestleMania, 'cause it's thumb wrestling time. Yes, it's thumb wrestling time. Yes, it's thumb wrestling time.
Hello, pod people. Wow, that's from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Welcome to this very special episode of Thumb Wrestling, the podcast in which I, Ruud Vos, will talk with a very special podcast about a certain film about which we disagree. And this time, it's time for episode, the answer to the ultimate question about life, the universe, and everything. Episode 42. And I couldn't leave such a wonderful opportunity to talk about The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Because for a very long time, this has been my very favorite piece of English comedy. Even more favorite than Monty Python, on which it draws a lot of its style. And also more favorite than stuff like Red Dwarf, The IT Crowd, Father Ted. It just stood out. It was more than comedy to me. So I also used to organize this evening in Nijmegen called Towel Day Nijmegen, on which we celebrated the author, Douglas Adams, and his works with a night of comedy and science and music and literature and sometimes also film. And of course it's called Towel Day, like the fan holiday, because of the importance of towels in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, how they are a thing that you always need to know where they are, just so you can reckon with the random chaos of the universe. There's a story of Douglas Adams receiving a letter from a fan, a woman who was on her deathbed, but she felt all right about it because at least she knew where her towel was. It's a thing that made Adams himself very uncomfortable, but it also tells about how much this idea resonated with his fans. And it's also a testament to how personal The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy feels to everyone. There's something in there that only you seem to get, and it makes a very, very close personal connection, and it's the same that I've always felt. So when episode 42 was creeping up, also a big factor in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I asked around what does everyone feel about the film. And most opinions seem to be somewhat in line with mine, at least mildly positive. So there were two, I think, that actually were quite negative, and one of them is our guest for today. And it's Mr. Steve Dix, a British comedian who lives in Cologne, Germany. And I met him at a science fiction themed comedy night at the Ironic Curtain in Amsterdam, organized by Ken Parsons. And he told me there that he actually has a sort of a science fiction niche in comedy. He goes to Comic-Cons and the like and does comedy there. So he is perfect for this subject. And of course, we connected on Facebook, where he shares almost every one of the best science fiction themed comedy memes out there. When he gave me the reaction I needed, I also knew that this is the dude I need to talk about The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy with. So we talked via Skype on the 2nd of August, and you will hear that I had to record his part of the conversation from my home. It's not the best quality, but you can understand it quite well, I think. And much more importantly, Steve knows his stuff. It was a good conversation. And The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is, of course, the movie from 2005, directed by Garth Jennings, with the lead roles for Martin Freeman, Zooey Deschanel, Sam Rockwell, and Mos Def. And it's about Arthur Dent, an Earthman who finds that his planet is being blown up to make way for a hyperspace bypass. Because you've got to make bypasses, don't you? His friend, who turns out to be an alien, Fort Prefect, saves him from the destruction of Earth and pushes him into a big adventure in the universe, armed with The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a book that contains all important knowledge, but is not necessarily very accurate. They learn that the ultimate answer to the ultimate question about life, the universe, and everything is 42, that the Earth was actually a big computer being built to calculate the question to the ultimate answer, and that life as we know it is not what it seems. But mostly, Arthur reconnects with Trillian, who is a girl that he met at a party who he completely blew it with. And they have a sort of romantic comedy adventure of their own. At the end, the Earth is rebuilt, but Arthur chooses to go off on new adventures with Trillian. The end. So let's start our talk. Come on in, Steve.
3, 2, 1, fire!
To start us off really with this, I was just wondering, what was your entry point into the Hitchhiker's Guide universe?
Right, well, the entry point, I should have actually got it out, was the original book.
Right.
The original paperback in 1979, I think, or 1978.
Yeah.
When it first came out.
Yeah.
With the hypnosis cover, saying don't panic. So that's very early. And then I discovered that that Christmas, the BBC were doing a special Christmas episode of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Really?
Which was, that's the one where Zaphod Beeblebrox actually walks into the offices of the guide.
Yeah.
After escaping from the ravenous bug-blatter beast of Trial.
Yeah, that's, I think, the first episode of Series 2 in
it's sort of between Series 1 and Series 2.
Yeah.
It contains the remarkable piece with Marvin and the giant frog skull robot.
Right, yeah.
Out of my way, you all robots.
Yeah.
And I got hooked.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I was that Christmas, I got this little clock radio cassette recorder.
Yeah.
And so I recorded all the second series.
Right.
And so then I had to wait for the first series to come on so I could record that. And then, of course, by that time it was 1980.
Yeah.
And out had come the TV series.
Exactly.
You could get the records. There were 2 records.
Yeah.
But they were really difficult to get hold of.
And they're slightly different versions from the radio.
Yeah.
I think there were new recordings, but I'm not entirely sure.
Well, the radio, you had the restaurant at the end of the universe.
Yeah.
They escape. They leave the restaurant on the end of the universe on a ship.
Yeah.
That's owned by the Hagunennon.
Mm-hmm.
Who then convert into the ravenous bug-blatter beast of Trial and eat them.
Yeah.
The problem is, firstly, that was co-written with
John Lloyd.
John Lloyd, the 9 o'clock news producer.
Yeah.
And so Douglas Adams couldn't really use that without paying him royalties.
Exactly, and he had told John Lloyd, I want to go off and do this on my own.
Yeah, so he went off and wrote the whole disaster area thing about rock bands.
Yeah.
Which in a lot of ways is better, although I did hear that apparently when they did the live theatre show,
Yeah.
they actually have a sofa that inflated and converted into the Bug Beast of Tra.
Wow, that is something.
Which is quite interesting, really. There's a lot of sort of coincidences between that and various other things. But basically, that was how I got into it. Was I read the book, I heard the Christmas episode.
Yeah.
Then I literally followed it from there.
Yeah.
And it's been something that lifelong I've been into. I got the original scripts.
Yeah.
Bought all the books, and really it was a labour of love buying the books because the books tended to be diminishing returns.
Right.
You've got the old problem with Douglas Adams that when he had to write to a deadline...
His famous quote is, of course, I love deadlines, I love the whooshing sound they make as they fly by.
And it got to the point where you got mostly Harmless.
Yeah.
Which, after all the fanfare, was a tiny little book about that thick.
Yeah.
And it was basically just setting up for one scene where he destroyed hitchhikers.
Exactly, because he was in a very bad place when he wrote that.
Yeah.
It's a long journey through development hell, which eventually led to the movie in 2005.
Oh, God. I remember hearing some of the horror stories.
Yeah.
At one point they had Ivan Reitman, Ghostbuster.
Yeah, that's 1982. Before he made Ghostbusters.
Why 42?
Yeah.
I can just imagine the sort of silence settling, and oh my God, this guy does not get it.
Yeah. So then Aykroyd handed him a script for Ghostbusters, and he went off to do that instead.
Yeah.
Actually, that first script of Ghostbusters that he got has more in common probably with The Hitchhiker's Guide than it does with the eventual Ghostbusters.
Does it?
Because Aykroyd had envisioned it as a thing that's in the far future where people are traveling through space and
right.
Ghostbusters are basically like firemen.
That's interesting. I'd like to read that.
Yeah. I think the first time I'd heard of The Hitchhiker's Guide was... before I knew what it was, but when I was about, I think, 12, I'd first learned of Red Dwarf.
Mm-hmm.
And that was through a CD with TV themes. And at some point I saw BBC is showing Red Dwarf, so I'm going to watch that. And I loved it immediately. So then I went on to the internet, which was still quite in its early days at that point. And I found a website which was dedicated to both Red Dwarf and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So I'd heard of the name because of that, but I hadn't delved into it that deeply yet. Then skip a few years, and I'm quoting Monty Python, the Galaxy song to someone, and someone asked me, is that Douglas Adams? And I'm saying, no, it's Monty Python. He said, you should read Douglas Adams, if you like that quote.
Douglas Adams did actually write for Monty Python.
Yeah, Series 4.
Series,
yeah.
He's actually in there as well, apparently. If you look at the big queue of people waiting to fix something.
Right.
He's one of them.
Yeah, exactly. Then that name got stuck in my head. And then it was around 2001, so it took a long time for me to actually get there. I was about 17 by then. And Douglas Adams died. And the BBC did reruns of the original TV series. So that's the first time I actually really got to know it. And then I went off to university and the book was for sale there somewhere. And I bought that. And then I found out that I could actually download the radio series and start listening to that. And one by one, I think I've seen and heard sort of every version of it now.
What's good about the film is the old stuff.
Yeah.
The new stuff isn't good. It's the old Samuel Johnson thing. Your film was both new and good. It's a pity that the stuff that was new wasn't good and the stuff that good wasn't new. Yeah?
I don't fully agree with that, but I can see where you're coming from.
The whole thing with Humakavula,
Right.
I didn't see how that was supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
I didn't find that funny. I found that just an excuse to do a special effect with the legs.
Right.
One of the things you have to know about Douglas Adams as well is that his prose is very, very well written.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the stuff and break it down into iambic pentameter,
Mm-hmm.
it works.
Right. It has a rhythm.
Yeah. And one of the first things I noticed about the new Hitchhikers, the film, was somebody had been in there with a pair of scissors
Right.
and cut stuff up to make it shorter.
Right.
And the rhythm was gone.
Yeah, they tried to impose a film rhythm onto The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and managed to catch neither.
And you know, and I know, that in comedy,
Yeah.
it's not what you say, it's the music of how you say it.
Right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's why I always have a problem doing German comedy,
Right.
because I can't hear the music of the actual language yet.
Yeah.
Whereas with English, I've grown up with it. I know how to use that for comedic effect.
Exactly.
And the person who had been in there and done that version had no comedic training.
No, there were filmmakers, actually first-time filmmakers. They'd done music videos, especially Garth Jennings and Nick Goldsmith.
And finally, I know that Douglas Adams said that he wanted the Hollywood treatment, but they'd gone too far in the Hollywood treatment. Everybody has somebody who loves them. And at the end, they're all happy and together. Even Zaphod
Yeah.
has a character who didn't even exist in the original, who loves him.
Yeah. Questular, something.
Yeah.
And Chancellor.
I miss a lot. There's like, for example, they're standing in the airlock
Yeah.
of the Vogon ship.
Yeah.
And there's a classic line, which is, I wish I'd listened to what my mother told me when I was young.
Yeah, I love that line too.
Or what did she say? I don't know, I didn't listen.
Yeah.
Which apparently he nicked from a friend.
Right.
But, they put them in the airlock and that's it. Boom, they're blown out into space. Not even that line.
No, they do the bit where Ford goes off and says, what's this? And then they don't even make that into Ford pulls one over on him, but simply, it's nothing. And sort of thrown away in a way. And I don't think it's the worst version of it. It could have been, but it doesn't land as well as when Ford is more like an aloof character. What was the first time you saw the film?
When I saw this movie for the first time.
Well, a group of us all went to watch it.
Yeah?
We all went and we all sort of came out and sort of went,
Could have been better.
Yeah, because one of my problems I have with Douglas Adams is he'll write something great.
Yeah.
And then because he's pushed into fulfilling a contract, he'll write something as a filler. And it slowly gets worse. You know what I mean?
You mean every version he does of a thing, it gets slightly worse, or also every new installment?
Every new version that he does.
Right. So the best version of it was the radio show?
Well, actually, I think the best version, is the TV series.
Right.
Because one of the things with the TV series was they could make it less wordy by showing things.
Yeah.
And of course, they had the fantastic animation. That's one of the reasons I don't like the film. If you take the TV series, there's sort of 4 25 minutes episodes cover the same stuff, which ends in the film.
Yeah.
And you could have a 100-minute film and still have all the material from those 4 episodes.
Exactly.
And that material is stuff people love. There are people, I remember when I was at university, we showed it as, we used to have a science fiction TV club.
Right.
And we'd show Hitchhikers, and there would be groups of people sitting at the back who knew every single word of it.
Exactly. Started quoting it back to her.
And could repeat it.
Yeah.
In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry and has widely been regarded as a bad move.
Can you remember where you were when Douglas Adams died?
I only heard of it after when it was too late, and when episode 2 was broadcast.
I can actually remember what happened.
Really?
I was freelance web programmer at the time.
Yeah.
Working for a little firm in a building just over from the sports arena in Cologne.
Yeah.
Which keeps changing its name.
Yeah.
Which now doesn't exist. Not the sports arena, the building. It was a former hospital type thing, which had then been converted into offices for startups. And I was working there, and it suddenly, someone said something like Douglas Adams is toy.
Right.
And I was like, what? And I immediately went on to Douglas Adams's webpage.
Yeah.
And the first thing I saw was that they had the sort of feedback where you could say what you wanted. And the first piece of feedback was from a guy called Paul Wilkinson.
Yeah.
Paul's a friend of mine. Paul he still does, run a website for Martin Newell.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know who that is.
Not immediately, no.
No. Martin is a sort of independent songwriter who is also the most published poet in Britain.
Really?
Still.
Yeah.
And later on, I got into helping him with Martin's blog. But that was just a really weird coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, but let's get back to the film.
Exactly. Let's not dwell on the sadness of that moment.
Yeah.
We have normality.
I think they deliberately tried to make Zaphod Beeblebrox more obnoxious.
At least his second head, that most.
Yeah.
But also, I think, there really is something to that he is being made even more annoying.
And I don't like that because half of the joke was everybody knew that Zaphod was really horrible.
Yeah.
But he's just a guy, Yeah.
Yeah.
And I missed the two heads.
The second one next to
having the head flip up. That smacks to me as we couldn't get the two heads to work. Let's just do it because we haven't got the money.
Yeah, and make him look normal most of the time.
Mm.
Yeah, it could be. The first time I saw that, when it was still one of the early trailers, I didn't like that with the second head. And once I saw the end film, I had already resigned to it. Well, that's what we're going to get. So, fine, we'll see. And then it just didn't bother me anymore. It won't say that it's my favorite version of it, far from it. I like the two heads and the three arms, even if one is just mostly just hanging there stiffly for most of the time in the television series, but I like the way that looks. And I do miss that, sort of.
Well, they could have even done it with practical effects.
Yeah. Most has been done with practical effects in the film, especially the Vogons, which I really liked.
Yeah, I mean, the Vogons are one of the best bits.
Yeah, but also when you look at the arm and the head popping up, that has to be done with CGI, and that's also the stuff that has aged the worst, I think.
Oh yes, watching it recently, it was really obvious that it was painted in.
Yeah, especially the third arm when it's doing the ice cubes in the Pan-Galactic Gargle Blasters. It comes out and it disappears again, and that's sort of a jarring thing. You should be able to see something at least part of the time. Yeah. So that makes it weird.
Incredible. It's even worse than I thought it would be.
They say that most of the new ideas of or almost all of them are from Adams's pen himself. That's what the producer says as well. But that they did give the script another treatment with new writers after Adams had died to make it more concise and flow better. So there is a suspicion that they cut out quite a lot of wordy jokes for that.
Yeah. The problem is it doesn't flow better.
I don't think I would agree with that. Yeah, it makes it lighter on the comedy things, which it could have had. It could have gone for more of a feel like for instance, the Monty Python films, where it feels more episodic and more sketchy and feels less like they are forcing a narrative onto it.
It was very episodic. And I think there were some things which were good. I enjoyed the fact that they got rid of the rather long sequence with the improbability drive, where they're on a pier and Ford turns into a penguin.
Right. Actually,
that never really worked.
Okay, well, that was one of the very first things I saw of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because I first saw episode 2, and that's how it starts, basically, with that sequence, and that's where I got hooked. So part of me misses that, but I do like the way that they put visuals on that now, with the knitted animation and the sofas. And those things, they do have a good style, good visual style. Also, where Garth Jennings and Nick Goldsmith just do their thing, the thing they're hired to do, make visual comedy with this premise. And those are the things I think work the best in the film. Also, one of the things that's most enduring, one of the things that's most embraced by lots of the fandom is Marvin's design.
Yeah. Well, Marvin's very good. If you watch the extras on the DVD, it's interesting to see how they put the costume together.
Right.
That huge head, he actually had a TV in it.
Right.
That's to see where he was going, and they got the perfect voice.
Yeah, Alan Rickman. Marvin. I would say that he's less sulky and more sarcastic than I'm used to, because, well, when you but Rickman is Rickman.
Isn't it that the performance has been compressed?
Right.
In the film, that there's not so much Marvin as there used to be.
Yeah.
Like Stephen Moore had 15 to 20 minutes.
Right. He could just go on and on and on and on, and it would remain funny. But now you have to do that in less time. So I do think Rickman is the way to go for that. Yeah.
And I have to say, out of all the American cast, I really don't like Mos Def.
Really? Why not?
Really. I just generally found him not to be Ford. I found it very difficult to understand the dialogue. Because
he has a very weird tone, very weird rhythm to him. Yeah. There is a jarringness to it. He seems to sometimes not know how to punch a punchline.
Yeah.
But I think that he could have been directed better. And I also do think that he was a bit shortchanged as a character in the film.
Well, I don't think he was an actor by that point, really, was he?
He'd acted before this, I think, but it's one of his first big gigs in a film. I also think his character was really shortchanged, because once they're on the Heart of Gold, he goes off just being sort of a side character for Zaphod Beeblebrox. Yeah. And Arthur's attention shifts entirely to Trillian, while in other versions, Ford always remains there, sort of a guide through the world, someone who also has difficulty with stuff, but he's always the one cooking up strange new things and plans and stuff like that. And now he just wanders off and goes drinking somewhere when they're in an adventure on Wildfoodle 6, and he has nothing to do anymore. So you basically can just wonder, why is he even still there?
Then you get the whole sort of rather pathetic thing with Arthur and Trillian.
Yeah, where the suddenly Douglas Adams is trying to be Simon Curtis.
Yeah,
and that's
What would have been much better if they actually showed what they had in the game.
In the game? The video game. I have never played that. That's the one version that I've never...
The Adventure. You can actually, I think you can still play it online.
Yeah.
The Infocom game.
Right.
When you end up at the party where Arthur Dent meets Trillian, and Trillian then meets Zaphod and goes off with him.
Yeah.
And of course, because they hadn't decided then that he was going to have the flip-top head.
Right.
Zaphod is dressed as a pirate and has a parrot cage on his shoulder with a cloth over.
Exactly. But what was the point about him and Trillian in that scene? Or
Well, he's just being this horrible, whiny character.
you mean Arthur?
Oh, please love me.
Yeah.
And you feel like hitting him again. Okay, so the whole point of Arthur is that you want to hit him sometime. But not for that.
But do you also dislike that he's being played by Martin Freeman, or only just the?
No, actually, I thought Martin Freeman was a brilliant casting for him.
It's an important and popular fact that things are not always what they seem.
But but I do. I will defend the film for what it is, and it is also for loads of people who've never read the books before, or heard the radio series, or played the video game, or any of the other versions. It is a good entry point for loads of them, like a gateway drug into heavier Hitchhiker type. How do you say, like hallucinogenic type things?
Yeah.
So it does work on that level, and I think it's hardest to watch it if you do know what comes before.
Yeah.
I do think that not all of it works as well as it could work, even from a fresh standpoint. But I do try when I watch it to shut off that part of my brain that goes, yeah, I know all these kinds of better versions of it.
There are good points which they let down later on. Like, for example, they start off with the dolphins. And that, I think, was a brilliant idea, moving that to the start.
Yeah.
Because it then gives it more of a whole feeling. Because originally that didn't come until about episode 3. And I thought the song, it's the Divine Comedy, basically.
Well, yeah, it's Joby Talbot, who's worked with the Divine Comedy, and Neil Hannon does the version in the end.
I thought that was good.
Yeah.
But they then have the sort of traditional Hitchhiker's opening with the Voyage of the Journey of the Sorcerer, sort of about 15 to 20 minutes in.
So they do a whole new introduction into the same thing.
Yeah, and I thought you can have one or the other, but you can't have both. It just knocks it. You either should have had that bit with the Hitchhikers at the front and forgot the big production number with the dolphins.
Yeah.
Or just one with the dolphins and cut down the Hitchhikers thing.
Yeah, and then just play the Journey of the Sorcerer at the end during the credits or something like that.
Yeah, well, there's an awful lot of British comedians in the film, if you look carefully. You've got Bill Bailey as the whale.
Yeah, League of Gentlemen.
You've got the League of Gentlemen as the Bogan. I like the song, because I generally tend to like Neil Hannon anyway.
So you would have just had it more, you would have preferred a more like a matter-of-fact introduction of the guide.
Yes.
Yeah, because right after they do that bit, which is a whole new introduction, then you see basically just Arthur lying on the floor, book in hand. And you could have had like more like the TV series scene where Ford hands him the book.
Well as that, you could have had a lot more of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
And there are more things where I think that you could have got more visual comedy out of a thing. Sometimes it's just Stephen Fry narrating over just a scene of just a few images.
That's my big problem with the guide, that there is no visual comedy in it.
Right.
And if you look at the BBC TV version, that was funny.
Yeah.
It was literally one of the first things where you had to have a video recorder to get it all. And you had to sort of stop it and wait a minute.
Exactly, just, all these tiny little things just hidden in full plain view. And sometimes they just flash away so quickly, but yeah. Yeah, I've met Rod Lord in London, 2009, the animator who did those animations. And I put my name down on a mailing list. And he started selling like printouts of his animations on eBay, and I got one.
Oh wow! Oh, brilliant!
This is probably my one. This is, I would say this is my first go-to joke if someone asks me what's your favorite joke from The Hitchhiker's Guide. The bowl of petunias going, oh no, not again.
Oh no, not again.
And of course, there's the whole sort of backstory that Douglas Adams put in there later on.
Yeah, Agrajag. Yeah, which the joke in itself doesn't need, but it was a good addition to that. Yeah, like a sort of a retconning his own joke, but in a good way. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so that's one of those jokes where it gets added on, but also built upon, and I think that's an important thing if you do these sorts of things. Whilst
it's tagging.
Yeah,
it's the whole thing of tagging a punchline.
Yeah, and also callbacks
and a back reference. Yeah.
But you have these things that you didn't like the part with John Malkovich, Wildfoedel 6, in the film, right?
In the film, I like the bit in the original guide.
Right, where you was just as
green arkle seizure.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I didn't mind it in the film so much. And I can't exactly put my finger on why that is. I sort of do like that they've made an actual cult of it, and I like the way they act there. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if I think that Malkovich's character is that necessary, especially except for a thing that's supposed to move the plot. But
the problem is it doesn't really move the plot along if you knew the plot in the first place.
No, that's true, but they also want to introduce...
If you remember the original, you had the argument that Zaphod had two heads, and they deliberately burnt out sections of his brain in the second head because he was part of a plot to find out who was actually really running the galaxy. And so the reason he was doing that was because he had to go to Magrathea, because they suspected that was one of the places where the people might be who are really running the galaxy.
Exactly. But in the film, I think it's basically to combine this part of like getting the coordinates to go somewhere with the other big MacGuffin in the film, the point of view gun, which only leads to one good joke, Marvin pointing it at Vogons to defeat them.
Yeah, the point of view was a bit of a waste for me as well.
Yeah, I thought it was all right the first time I saw it, but not as good as some of the other material. But I still do like that bit with Marvin pointing it, even though it's been shot in the head before that. But let's just ignore that bit. Yeah, but that's an addition to it's also building upon a joke, but it's mostly stretching the joke of the Great Green Arkle seizure, but in a way that I found at least visually interesting.
Well, you see, I got to the point where they're singing the song.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is now, the joke stopped being funny about a minute ago.
Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah.
And this is one of the problems I have with a lot of people who start comedy is a joke is funny and then it stops being funny. And just by referring to it and extending it, you're not making it funny. Yeah. People have laughed at it and they've stopped laughing at it. If you leave it and do a back reference, it'll become funny again. But if you just stretch it out to fill space...
I keep standing right in the middle of it and drawing attention to it.
You'll notice the audience starts fidgeting. You start looking at the phones or...
Yeah. I found it visually arresting enough to be engaged on a not comedy side of things. I would put it that way. But it's in sharp contrast with... Have you read the 6th Hitchhiker's Guide novel? And Another Thing.
Oh, Ian Colfer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that book was published in 2009 when I was in London. And there was that HitchCon conference. So I bought the book there, got an autograph from Owen Colfer. I never read any of the Artemis Fowl's books. I haven't to date. So I'm sure they're great. But I did find that that the book was a disappointment for me. And that's because of two things. One, that the characters didn't act like the characters as they were in my head. So that was jarring for me. In a way, though, in the film they don't either, but it's because they have a very sharp look in there, like a very defined look. I can easily like, oh, they're a version. That's not my version, maybe, but I'm fine with that. I can see these versions play out their thing. While in the book, it's more like trying to appeal to the version I'd read before, and it just wasn't that. But the second thing was also that I got quite annoyed with jokes from the original novels just being stretched. And one of the most clear ones is the dish of the day joke, the Amygdalian major cow. Now suddenly you have a herd of them, and at some point it becomes sort of a kamikaze type thing. And that's where that just stopped being fun. It's just pointing at the original joke and saying, "Ah, that was funny, wasn't it? Remember that?" And for the rest, there were some new things added which I sort of liked. It wasn't written badly, and the thing that made me most angry about it was that it wasn't even that bad, so I couldn't be really that angry about it, but just bored with it, in a way.
Well, the way I remember it is, if I look back at all the Hitchhiker's books, it's the one I can't really remember any plot from.
The whole Northern Ireland, what do you call it, pastiche in there? You don't remember any of that?
I don't remember any of it. I've read it twice.
Oh, I've only read it once, and I remember more of it than you.
Well, I mean, I tend to devour books. I mean, I've got really bad since portable devices came out because I sit and read Facebook instead of reading a book. I'm trying to do that anymore. Yeah, and another thing is...
Ha! Oh, were you referring to the book or not?
Yeah. Even though when you're reading a Hitchhiker's book, it's not necessarily a Hitchhiker's book.
What do you mean?
Well, for example, the third Hitchhiker's book was actually a Doctor Who script.
That's true, yeah, the Cricket Man.
The first Dirk Gently book was actually Pirate Planet.
Yeah.
Mixed with...
Sharda.
Sharda.
Yeah.
So I remember watching the Pirate Planet, and they have the whole thing of the Empress of the Universe is nearly dead.
Yeah.
And that pops up in the Pirate Planet as well, and you think, wait a minute.
But that had actually been made into an episode. Sharda was cancelled and later remade as an animation.
Yeah. It's not completely an animation. They've got all the studio stuff in there.
Right, yeah.
It's still Tom Baker and Lola Ward.
Yeah.
Slarty Bart fast. I said it wasn't important.
So, when it comes to the cast, how did you like Bill Nighy?
I thought Bill Nighy was a good choice.
Because
he's got that sort of vagueness down, which is part of Slarty Bart fast.
Yeah. And so he's also been described as bored with the whole thing, and that also, translates well into the role he's playing. Yeah, where do I want to go with this?
What was the thing he did with, it was about the band, with Billy Connolly?
Right. What was that called?
Fact check Norris.
Fact check Norris here. The movie Steve is alluding to is called Still Crazy. Fact check Norris out.
But he seems to be playing a similar character there.
Yeah.
So he's playing a Slarty Bart fast.
And also a bit in Love Actually, his role in that is also not dissimilar. Also someone who's lost interest in what he's doing.
Yeah.
Sort of that kind of thing. And it does work. Still prefer Richard Vernon's version of it, but he was my first Slarty Bart fast, so that doesn't help.
And apparently the way that Douglas Adams invented the name Slarty Bart fast,
I do know that.
The guy has got to have a sadness about him.
Right.
And what's he going to be sad about? Well, he's got a horrible name.
Yeah.
So he basically started out with Farty Fuckball.
Yeah.
Also, and of course they couldn't transmit that.
So no. You could write it down in a way that would go past the censors, but not the way you pronounce it. Yeah, and he just rearranged syllables and stuff like that until this became it.
Mm.
Yeah, how do you like Zooey Deschanel as Trillian?
I think she's the best thing in it.
Really?
Yes.
That's quite interesting. Also because, well, arguably Trillian has the least own personality in the original versions.
Well, the thing is, Trillian really hardly exists in the first version.
Yeah. She's just
And
there.
she disappears in the second series.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's true.
And then she basically doesn't reappear until about third or fourth book.
Yeah. No, in the books, I think she's in all of the books. She's certainly in the third. There she, once Slarty Bartfoss has been transformed into like a driving power, she gets to be the one who solves the problem.
Yeah. I think the role of Trillian was originally became a lot more in the TV series. I think that's where Trillian actually became a personality.
Yeah, more than just a vehicle.
And I think when they cast Zooey Deschanel, they managed to catch what she sort of added to it.
Yeah, but I would say that she is a very, very much a type of love interest that was very fashionable at that point in time in 2005, namely the Manic Pixie Dream Girl.
Mm-hmm. She's also very disappointed with everybody.
That's true. Yeah, she has more character than just being a Manic Pixie Dream Girl, but that's the way that she's positioned, at least at the party, like being a whimsical.
But she ultimately turns on Zaphod. Ultimately, she turns on Arthur.
Quickly at the party already, but that was already in the original material. Only now they've given it more of a reason, like he's not adventurous enough.
I would have preferred if they hadn't made her such a love interest.
More of a turned off by everyone by now and just...
Well, yes and no. The bit with the Bud Blatter Beast of Trail with her hanging her, that's so forgettable.
Where she becomes a damsel in distress.
Yeah, and that bit is basically, it's not even original. It's stolen from an Asterix.
Really?
The 12 Tasks of Asterix, have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
And they have to go through getting a form.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they have to go through and ask for this form. And go
one of the most
window.
memorable bits of that film, yeah.
That's basically the Vogon section.
Yeah.
It's stolen from 12 Tasks of Asterix.
Are you sure they stole it?
We've got a time limit on what we've got to do because they're hanging her above a Black Beast of Trail.
How did you like the visual joke with every time someone says idea or something like that, they get slapped in the face when they're outside?
I hated it.
Hated it? Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I just found it irritating.
I did think that it was sort of... I didn't think it was irritating. I actually liked it as sort of a visual comedy thing. And I thought it was actually sort of an explanation... Sorry?
It is literally slapstick.
Yeah, but I don't mind slapstick if it's done well.
Yeah, but we're trying to make an ironic comment about slapstick. And it didn't work for me.
Okay.
I mean, I know the argument that it was a Douglas Adams thing. He thought it up at his computer company and told the programmers about it. And everybody went, oh, yes, that's genius. The whole point of every time a Vogon comes up with an idea, one of these things slaps it in the face. But if that's the case, why do the Vogons have a civilization?
42.
So what are the things that you missed most about other versions of The Hitchhiker's Guide that you would have liked to see in this film?
More of the guide.
More of the guide, especially. But some bits especially where you think I would have loved to see what they could have done with this?
Well, the one that really irritated me is the post-credits one, where they took the whole thing of careful talk, tell us talk cost lives. And instead of it being, I seem to be having tremendous difficulty with my lifestyle, it was some other.
They picked a random other sentence.
And you looked at it and you thought, whoever cut that down really, really, really doesn't know anything about comedy. Because if you look at, say, the way they handled it in the TV series, as the video game.
Right.
And they settled their remaining differences. Zap.
Yeah, you don't get that. That is a good visual joke that didn't translate into the film. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like that they cut the thing they had made about the argument about God, even though I missed that bit. But they have made an animation for that and they cut it, where there's God on a treadmill and man as a kind of small Superman jumps on it, and the puff of logic in which he disappears is just the treadmill going overdrive, and then he gets swooshed to the side, and there's a cloud in the form of God remaining there. And I just didn't like the way they translated it into a visual joke.
I found that to be very dull in comparison with the TV series version,
where they have the David and David, the Adam's creation of Michelangelo. Yeah, and it's so simpler, but also way more elegant of a way to take that argument and make it into a joke. Yeah, I do.
And they could have borrowed that. They could have just said, "Okay, we can't come up with anything better.
Yeah.
This is brilliant.
Yeah,
use it."
And maybe just get Rod Lord on board as a sort of a consultant for those type of things. How did you like the basic look of the guy? Like the yellow screen with things popping up?
I liked it.
Yeah,
I thought it was obviously you've got to do something. You can't just copy what they did in the 80s.
No, it's very much a style that looks like 80s.
Nearly 40 years of graphic user interfaces. And so, well, if you think about the web, it is basically the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was preempting a mobile device with the web.
We have normality.
There were going to be alternative versions. We already spoke of the Ivan Reitman one, which didn't come into fruition in 1982. They tried to pitch the role of Ford Prefect to Bill Murray.
Yeah.
Or Dan Aykroyd, but then Aykroyd came up with his own script and Reitman went off to do that. Do you think Murray would have made a good Ford or a better Zaphod Beeblebrox, maybe? As someone you might want to point...
I think Zaphod Beeblebrox, because that's his obnoxious character. And Dan Aykroyd, I think they would have cast as Ford.
That could have been a good one.
Because Dan Aykroyd has that just generally friendly character.
Exactly. And he can easily play a weird best friend. But in 2001, there was after about 10 years of trying to get a script done by that time, after having been on hiatus for quite a long time, they got Jay Roach in to helm it or produce it. They also had Spike Jonze as an interested party to direct it. And they'd envisioned Hugh Laurie as Arthur.
Yeah.
Maybe Jim Carrey as Zaphod Beeblebrox. I can see you thinking, like, I'm not sure how that would have looked, but all right.
Well, it depends. I mean, when was that in Jim Carrey's career? Had he sort of done
2001? It's just about the time of the Truman Show, I think. Jay Roach had just done Meet the Parents, which was supposed to be with Jim Carrey, but turned out to be a Ben Stiller vehicle instead. So he'd done the first two, maybe first three, but I think only the first two Austin Powers films. It's after.
I think Jim Carrey would have been too way over the top. He'd still be playing his
Ace Ventura type.
Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. Speaking of Ace Ventura, I've got a little story about one of the actors in there.
Yeah?
The actress, better known for being in Blade Runner.
Yeah. Sean Young.
Yeah, Sean Young. My first ever FedCon where I performed in the days when it was in Dusseldorf, and they weren't too finicky about separating the normal people from the talent. I'm sitting waiting for the opening ceremony.
Yeah.
And Sean Young comes and sits next to me.
Cool.
And starts chatting to me.
Oh, that is nice.
Yeah, and she was quite friendly. We were talking. Something weird was happening on stage. They got a sushi chef who worked at the Maritime in Dusseldorf, and I think he'd actually sung the theme tune in a previous life for some Japanese manga.
Right.
And so he's on stage singing this. They've somehow discovered this.
Yeah.
And she's asking me what's going on because, I mean, everything's in German and I'm
Right.
having to answer. And I'm sort of sitting there, sort of laid back, sort of chatting with Sean Young. And inside my head, there's the inner fanboy screaming, "Oh my God, I'm sitting next to Rachel and Shawnee."
So to get back to that Jay Roach version, there was one other person who was considered for Slarty Bartfast, which I think is really interesting, and I would have liked to see it. Nigel Hawthorne.
Nigel Hawthorne, remind me.
From Yes Minister.
Oh, yeah. Because that would have tied in nicely with his role in Madness of King George.
Exactly. And
no, British actor with a good name.
Yeah, and Demolition Man. It's around the time that he was actually, he was quite well noticed by Hollywood by then, yeah. So I would have liked to see that. No, I think they did quite a good job with the casting. I do feel that Stephen Fry is not my favorite version of the Guide. Maybe because I'm so used to Peter Jones. But also Peter Jones has this way of saying weird stuff and just plowing through without really understanding why he's saying it, but embracing that it's probably funny, so all right, let's do this. And sounding authoritative in that. While Fry, he has this mode where he does understand what he's saying because he is a fan of it himself.
With it.
Sorry?
He's too familiar with it.
Exactly. Maybe it would have been more to my liking if it had been less his QI style of saying the things, and maybe more if it would have taken more of a vibe of like Lord Melchett. Like an idiot trying to sound wise and sound like he knows what he's saying. I think that could have improved a bit for me, but I don't hate it. It's just, yeah, he also doesn't seem to make the most of it for me in a way.
I think the problem is that they generally just don't have enough of the Guide in it. Give him a chance.
He could have shown more brightly.
Effectively, the first film is the first 4 episodes, and if you look at the first 4 episodes on TV, they had a lot more Guide in.
Well, I just listened to another podcast, The Rule of Three. It's 2 comedy writers. They invite a guest on each time, and they discuss a thing of comedy, and they dissect it, or just keep on quoting it. Either way, they just have a long talk about it, and they really get into the writing and identifying which makes stuff work. And they identify The Hitchhiker's Guide itself as being the protagonist of the story. That's the basically the thing that has the most jokes. It's the thing that is the most fun, and it always ends with every series ends with a nod to the Guide, where that ends up being, and how that will that survive being thrown into the river or something like that. So that's always the central thing to it. And they do say at the start of it, well, telling the story of the Guide is telling the story of a man, namely Arthur Dent, but here they've just really focused on Arthur's journey and added to his journey to make it more of a journey instead of him just reacting to things that are being thrown into his life because of the Guide. The Guide doesn't even, it's sort of revealed as sort of a starting point, an explanation why Fort Prefect is even in his life and saves him. But it's also very shortly mentioned and then never seen again. That Fort Prefect is there to research the Guide. It's even the thing about mostly harmless is cut out, which could have really at least underlined that reason for him being there, but it's gone.
Well, that's the whole 2 or 3 pages of the book.
Yeah,
It's Arthur trying to come to terms with the fact that Earth has just been destroyed.
Loads of the times when you do get a joke from the guide, they just take the first premise of the joke, while in the other versions, including the book, including the radio series, they dwell in it longer, and then you get to a point where, sort of by an end punchline, it comes round back on itself, maybe with a reference to what it starts with again, but it just builds on being funny. And now they just have the starting bit, point from, hey, this was a funny thing from that, and then they move on to the next thing.
Yeah, it's like taking a comedian's 10-minute routine and then just cutting it down to the first joke.
Exactly. And they keep on doing that. Well, if you would have allowed for a more Monty Python-like approach, you could have kept that in and still made a film.
Yeah.
I think you ought to know I'm feeling very depressed.
But who would you have liked to take a stab at the Hitchhiker's Guide? If in this version instead of this one, or if they would do one now, who do you think might be able to make something of it?
My problem is that I don't really want it to be remade.
No?
I think there's far too many remakes that go on.
And there are plenty of versions that you like already.
There's enough versions of it already. You can spend years going through the books, the TV series, computer games, the associated computer games. It doesn't need to be remade. And there is a problem in Hollywood that they have this attitude: you've got to have a franchise. You've got to do this, and you've got to do that, and you've got to do that, and it's got to be made this way. But the problem I have with Hollywood is it doesn't do enough original stuff. It doesn't take any risks anymore. Like, for example, they remade The Italian Job.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. All the stuff that brings you to the original has been taken out.
But it was in the wake of Ocean's 11, which arguably was a better version than the Rat Pack one. But then they decided, well, we have another heist.
It's basically accountants making film decisions. We have this property. Let's remake it. There's an audience out there for it.
If you would say that you wanted to improve the film, what would you do?
Improvementario.
Cut out most of the new stuff and go back to the original plot and the original jokes. I know that they have to put in a certain amount of new stuff to justify it, but there's
maybe not. You can make new versions of all kinds of stuff, and sometimes they even say that, well, we're going way more back to the original version of it, but it's a new interpretation. Because, well, the original is very much a product also of its time, and you could try and translate it more to now, like cut out the digital watches and maybe make it about I don't know, smartphones. Well, it's 2005, so smartphones are maybe a bit early, but
smartwatches.
Yeah, laptop computers or something maybe. I'm not sure, but you can fiddle with that stuff a bit more maybe, but yeah, just make a more modern translation of it then, I think. But I can understand if you think, well, when it comes to the comedy bit of it, they're not the best team to helm it. But you did like the way it looked?
The design was fantastic. I enjoyed the design.
Yeah.
I just felt that it was done a disservice to the original material.
Yeah, the thing that makes it the best thing.
It looked fantastic.
Right.
And they could have taken the original jokes and run with them.
Yeah.
Because they had a bigger budget.
Yeah.
Like as I said, Zaphod's Head.
Yeah.
I mean, it was 2005. By 2005, animatronics had come a long way.
Yeah.
As had the computer. They could have just had the moving head.
Yeah.
And put crosses on it so that they could put his head on digitally.
Or, well, they used loads of puppeteering to make the vocals and stuff like that. Maybe it would have been more easy to make a second head with that. Yeah,
they were saying one of the things Douglas Adams hated about the TV series was that it had basically Doctor Who style effects.
Right.
Which were the best that the BBC could come up with at the time.
Yeah, it took away the budget of the goodies.
which was also a very heavily special effects-based TV series.
That's why they thought the Hitchhiker's Guide was going to be the next big thing. Something that would get them more than one series and a big success.
Well, the point that the biographer makes is it didn't need to have Star Wars effects.
Yeah.
Because it's the same thing as Doctor Who in that because the writing is so good, it doesn't break the believability of things. No. Okay, so you see things and they look slightly dodgy.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. It's not the final straw. You're still wanting to find out what happens.
No, the quality of the writing animates the thing that can't be animated by,
Whereas modern day, a lot of things, a lot of TV series and a lot of movies have fantastic special effects. The quality of writing is fairly poor, and the special effects are being used to mask that. And you lose interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, before we close it off, at least, I have asked you for 3 recommendations for the listeners.
3 recommendations, right. Well, as we're on a sort of humour theme, I thought I'd go for these. One of them isn't actually a film, it's TV.
That is fine. I'll allow it.
Tip 1!
Related. So the first thing is Brazil.
Yes.
Which is a fantastic black comedy.
Mm-hmm.
You can take it on 2 levels. I like it because Terry Gilliam went out on a limb to make this.
Yeah. Have you read the book The Battle for Brazil?
No.
It is fantastic. It relates the whole story of the production, how he had to fight the studio together with his producer as a good team to make a fist to release it in the way that he intended.
Yeah.
It's a good read.
I remember it coming out and you just couldn't see it outside of London.
Right.
In the UK. You had to be in Birmingham or Manchester and at the time where I lived, you just couldn't get to see it. It wouldn't come to our local cinemas. They really, really deliberately tried to kill it.
Yeah, it's insane.
Tip 2!
On the humour thing, Hogfather.
Very good.
Possibly the best Terry Pratchett adaptation.
I do think so. I prefer it to The Call of Magic and to Going Postal. Why? What makes it so good?
Basically, it expands on a number of Discworld characters. It expands on Death's daughter.
Yeah.
Fact check Norris.
Fact check Norris here. Susan Stowe Hallett is actually Death's granddaughter, but it's easy to make this mistake. I think Rude has done so many times, and he would have corrected him if he realized it at the time. Alright, fact check Norris out.
Who's apparently modelled on Terry Pratchett's daughter.
Really?
You have the assassin, Mr. Teatime.
Yeah.
And Albert, Death servant. It's also one of the strongest books because Hogfather is a sort of Christmas analogy.
Yeah, I read it with Christmas, when it was Christmas. Yeah.
So, yeah, in fact, I think I'll watch it tonight.
And David Warner is in it. Always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Tip 3!
But what I really recommend for fans of Terry Pratchett, and this got really missed when it came out.
Right. Yes. Soul music.
Animated version of soul music. And there's a reason I recommend this, is because years and years and years ago, about 1993, I went to Birmingham for a signing. It was Weird Sisters. I think it was signing. No, it wasn't Weird Sisters. It was the one that's sort of based on the film.
Right.
I can't remember which one it was. And, of course, everybody was going and having a little chat with Terry Pratchett. And I got up and this was at the local sort of Birmingham fantasy store, fantasy and science fiction store. But that was the place I went to get stuff. And next to it, guitar shop. And this guitar shop is where I bought my first Rickenbacker. And literally going there and buying the Rickenbacker was when I found out Terry Pratchett was going to be there.
Cool.
And So I went and I said to Terry Pratchett, when it got to be my turn, why can't you do a book about rock music on the Discworld? And he says, well, I'm sort of trying at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's difficult. And then 6 months later, what comes out?
Soul music.
Mm-hmm. And what's even more brilliant about this is the music.
Yeah.
You can actually get it on a CD.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to find, but it's out there. It's fantastic. It's been done by someone who actually knows what they're on about and knows the book
and
knows the time period that they're talking.
Yeah, and it's only an hour long, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they've managed to do all that in animation of 1 hour. They also did Weird Sisters, which was really good as well.
But it was incredible because they managed to do Buddy Holly.
Yeah.
Do the Beatles.
Yeah.
Bit of Rolling Stones, Hendrix.
Yeah.
And a bit of Led Zeppelin.
Right.
More fairy Led Zeppelin.
All right. So, did you enjoy it? This talk?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, I enjoyed it a lot.
Cool.
It's the first time I've talked within a week.
Really? You've been so isolated this whole time with COVID.
I work for Ford, and Ford sent us all home in March.
Right.
He said, don't come back in. You don't need to come back in. You've got a computer.
Yeah.
Stay at home. You can do all the networking stuff over there.
Yeah.
Over VPN.
Yeah.
And the only time I talk to anybody is on Mondays when we have our meeting.
Right. Oh, wow.
And apart from occasionally going out because I do improv when we meet up on Mondays.
Yeah.
That's the only time I really get to talk to anybody apart from my mother who phones up.
Oh, wow.
And so we fought and we battled, yes, we beat each other up. Both of us tried hard, we both failed. Yes, I had you by the thumbs, but neither of us won. Only the love for cinema prevailed.
That's it. Thank you so much for listening. I always really enjoy talking about The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I especially enjoy talking about it with Steve Dix. Thank you, Steve, for being so indulgent for me to talk at length about my obsession and to join in the fun. Thank you. And I'm especially happy that you also injected it with some Terry Pratchett. I just started reading one of his novels now, Thud. I'm quite curious about where that will lead, but yeah, we'll see. Of course, I haven't watched too many movies the last 2 weeks for obvious reasons, but I did after the service for my brother the day after. I went to see Tenet, the new Christopher Nolan film. I really enjoyed it. I can't recommend it enough. I think further viewing will improve it even for me. I won't spoil anything of it to you. Although I do think that having seen it, I think it's sort of unspoilable. But once you've seen it, maybe you'll get what I mean. Another film that I saw that I really enjoyed was Missing Link, an animation by Laika Studios, and it's not the favorite for many people, but I thought it was really good. It was really on par with their animation style, and especially the way they put skill into that was amazing for me. I really enjoyed it. Now, if you want to hear me get a bit personal about my brother, please hang in, but let me at least round this off by saying that this was a cinema production, hosted and edited by me, Ruud, de 20e eeuwse Vos, and the jingles are, as always, and these were a special batch of jingles made especially for this episode, so very special thanks to the genius that is Roy Grutters, who was also always a very big part of Towel Day, one of the co-organizers. So you can find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and of course Twitter. And every bit of hate mail that you can scrap up, you can send in to duimpjeworstelen@gmail.com. All right, that's it. See you Wednesday after next.
So long, and thanks for all the fare. Ladies and gentlemen, could we have an enormous round of applause, please, for our host, who has once again succeeded in bringing to us a plethora of top-notch, cinematographically themed entertainment. We have had an absolute ball, have we not? This podcast employs a strict only like and subscribe if you really want to policy. Okay, bye.
So, I find it hard to know what to talk about, and it's maybe a bit weird for me to do this in Dutch. No, not in Dutch. In English. Talk about my brother, but I will just give it a go, and I will just keep recording this and see just where it goes. So this podcast was supposed to be coming out on Wednesday the 26th, but instead I was at a funeral service for my bigger brother Tim, who'd died a week before. So what happened, at about 7 in the morning, he had just given his wife a hug, and he said he'd go down to the toilet, not to wake up his children, who are 5 years old and 3 years old. And then he just didn't come back up to get dressed and stuff like that. So his wife, she said to the children, go and see where daddy is. And they found him in the toilet. And what had happened was that he'd had a severe cerebral infarction, which means that he had a big blood clot stuck in his brainstem, which is the part that gives oxygen to the brains. But at that point, they didn't realize what it was. He was just unconscious on the toilet. So they got him to a hospital, where they found the blood clot after some research, and by 11 they got to operate on him to remove the blood clot, but it was too late. There was too much damage, and about at the end of the afternoon we just knew that it was too much and that he wouldn't survive this. So I was there in the room with his wife Jean and with my parents, who've been divorced, but for a long time. But yeah, it was a very tough wait, and my girlfriend was there as well. I should especially mention her for her big support for me these last few days. Anouk, thank you for being there for me. But you know that. I'm sure you know that. I don't have to tell you that in the podcast. So we knew then that he was going to die, and it was only made official the day after for technical reasons. But for us, he died on that Wednesday. Maybe it's good to clarify that my brother and I weren't exactly very close. He was always very much into sports, while I was a bit nerdy. But we did have movies in common. For a very long time. When we were very young, we would go to the video store every week almost, well, maybe even more than once a week, loads of weeks, but you get the gist. And I used to rent all these very corny comedies while he got action movies. So he introduced me to stuff like Rambo and Rocky and Commando and American Ninja, and appropriately for this podcast also to loads of Chuck Norris movies. But even in movie taste, we differed. One of his favorite movies for a very long time was Jerry Maguire, which I hadn't seen ever until the time of his death. It was just one of these movies that he could always put on. It was always a big consolation for him, maybe a bit like how The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy has been that for me. And I just felt that I should watch it. I had the idea that I'd seen all of it by then because I used to be in the room when he put it on, or I would walk in the room when he was watching it so many times that via Tim, I think I must have seen almost all the movie, but just not in order. But yeah, I watched it the day after, and I could really see why he loved this film so much. There were things in there that spoke to who Tim was. There were also a couple of things in there that sort of felt weird because of what happened to Tim in the end. If you look at the end scene where Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character has just scored a winning point and then goes unconscious on the field, that sort of, felt very weird for me to see that the day after the funeral. But, well, it's just one of these things. So, but yeah, Tim also had some personal problems connected with the divorce of my parents. But I'm not going to get too deep into that because we weren't that close. He never personally related them to me, so I don't feel at liberty to talk about them too much. I just want to say about that the last half year of his life, he seemed to have become more at peace with that. He'd gotten a bit better at the emotional state, probably also because he was taking antidepressants. But again, it's something that he never told me. It's something that I heard via my mother because we weren't really communicating that much. At family gatherings, we tolerated each other quite well in the room. We did talk then, but it was superficial. It was just not that deep. But anyway, my point I was trying to make is that I was just glad that he was feeling better, that things were going much better for him. So that also makes it just really all the more tragic what happened to him in the end. But I also choose to see that on the positive side, that at least he had those 6 months or a bit more where he did feel better about life, where he had learned to take care of himself. And yeah, if I didn't get to be a part of that, then so be it. I will have to be at peace with that. So as I said, he leaves a wife, Jean, and 2 small children of 5 and 3, Jens and Nils. And they're going to have it very tough, especially Jean. She's at it alone. She has lots of family who are very supportive. She has a very close group of friends who can support her. Tim's group of friends, they will support her a lot, but no matter what they can do, it will be tough for her, most definitely. So that's the thing that touches me the most about this whole situation, and that makes me saddest. And, well, we'll just see how that goes. There is one thought that I had that I would still like to share with you, and it's maybe one that I feel is especially strange, that even though he died at way too young an age, he still has had more life than me. He still was older than I am now when he died. And I've marked a certain Monday in my diary, a bit more than a year from now, a year and a month and X days, where I will turn older than he has ever been. And I will think about him that day, and I will call my parents, and I will feel sad. And maybe I'll watch Jerry Maguire again, I'm not sure. But yeah, that's going to be another special day for me, thinking about my older brother. And even though I will turn older than he's ever been, he will always be my older brother, and I will miss him. Because we shared so many of the same parts of life when we were very young. And we've experienced the same things, for good and for bad. And he's been important for me and for who I've become. Also, just in this podcast, everything that I've experienced has led up to this. And even if we haven't been close and we fought a lot about back in the days when there was a lot of tension in the house because of the divorce of our parents, which he hadn't taken well. There's nothing that he's ever done to me that I can't forgive. And I have forgiven him for anything a long time ago. And I don't think it's important to dwell on that. Is there something else I want to say? I'm not sure. Oh yeah, just one thing that the first thing about after he died that really touched me was hearing that his group of friends came together on the day that he got the cerebral infarction, and they also did a big part of the funeral service where they sort of took over and gave him a perfect send-off in their own style. Tim used to organize the pub crawls for the group after something had gone wrong on one of their holidays where they were too late with subscribing for one. So he said, I'm going to take care of that. So they made a pub crawl of his life and saying, well, pub 1 is elementary schools. The second pub is high school. And they gave him a big round of. But just hearing that they came together on the day of his death, that really, really touched me a lot. And I'm just so happy that even in the times that he didn't feel well in general, that they gave him a safe space where he could feel like himself, be himself, and be the best version of himself. And also that he had a very good understanding wife with whom he also could be himself fully and open and stuff like that. So, I will miss Tim, even though we didn't connect that much anymore at the end. But, yeah. Bye, Tim. Just one more thing before I end this talk. If you want to send me support, you're very welcome to. Send me an email or send me some support via social media. I will be glad to read it all. You can also call me self-indulgent for being this open in this podcast. I don't mind. It's cool. Please don't send any support messages for his wife. She hasn't elected to be talked about in this podcast, so I already feel that I'm sort of infringing on that, and I would feel very uncomfortable having to pass on those messages. I don't know if you understand, but it's just, yeah, it would be just weird. All right, thank you for listening. And goodbye. Cheers.